As Nigerians turn to scoring the Muhammadu Buhari administration in its final days, the administration's handling of the largest economy on the continent will increasingly be under the spotlight. As President Buhari prepares to leave office, he's leaving behind an inflation rate that has hit a 16-year high, about 95 million Nigerians living in poverty, record high unemployment, and a debt burden that is now over 46 trillion naira and was just about 12 trillion naira when he came into office in 2015. But that's not the only thing Buhari is leaving behind. In a circular signed by the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, the Buhari administration has approved new fiscal policy measures for 2023 that mean that Nigeria will begin to tax single-use plastic, while a 5% telecommunications tax has also been approved. There is an excise duty ranging from 20 to 100% on alcoholic beverages, tobacco, wines, and spirits. My guest has described these fiscal measures as President Buhari's parting gift to Nigerians. Taiwo Oyedele, fiscal policy partner and Africa tax leader at PwC, joins me now on Business Edge. Taiwo, a gift is usually a good thing. You've titled your breakdown of the fiscal policy measures for 2023 as the president's parting gift to Nigerians. We've talked about taxes a lot this year. What kind of gift is this?
Thank you, Tolu. A gift doesn't have to be really what you want, but unfortunately, when it comes to taxes, it's a gift that you may have to accept even when you don't like it. So I'll say that the fiscal policy measure for 2023 is a mix of what you would commend and welcome, and also a few things that I believe could have been done differently. So essentially, this is something that the government does every year, fiscal policy measures to try and update the rules around import duties, excise taxes, and a few other changes in the law. So this is not unusual, except that this latest one was dated 20th of April. I think, in fact, was released just a few days ago, and then the effective date for some of the provisions is 1st of May, which is already yesterday, and the remaining provisions to be the 1st of June. So this is not consistent with the requirements in the fiscal policy, national tax policy, I should say, that requires a minimum of 90 days between when you introduce changes to the tax rules and when they take effect, of course, for obvious reasons.
Yes.
Now, this regulation also has provisions for green taxes, like you mentioned, like tax on single-use plastic, as well as for motor vehicles of more than 2 liters, that's 2060 and above, we have to pay taxes, and then a confirmation that we have to pay excise duty on telecommunication for both voice and data.
All right, so Taiwo, let's start this breakdown. But you've mentioned, of course, some of these policy inconsistencies, and I want us to start from there. There seems to be some inconsistencies with the 2022 to 2024 roadmap, which was approved via the 2022 fiscal policy measures. What are some of the more glaring ones that seem to stick out to you?
Yes, thank you, Tolu. So, the economy has been struggling, and the naira scarcity that the CBN introduced towards the end of last year, at the beginning of this year, hasn't helped. So you find the food, beverage, and tobacco subsector of manufacturing, which is the largest, contributing about 40% to that sector, has suffered significant decline in double digits just in the first few months of this year. So they are struggling. That's what it is in reality. As if that is not bad enough, what has happened is, as of 2022, the federal government introduced a roadmap that says for 2022, 2023, and 2024, these are the taxes I would introduce on tobacco, on alcohol, non-alcoholic beverages, on wine, and so on and so forth, right? And I have to say to you that even that roadmap was a significant increase on the taxes that were being paid in that sector before 2022. So, but then the industry had to accept it. Government needs money and all of that, and then they had to plan. And then midway into the implementation, government decided that they want to further increase the increases that have been approved without justifying the basis, or what is it that is now different that you didn't know before? Because based on the available data, in fact, the sector is needing more support now than when the original roadmap was introduced in 2022. Now, these further increases are ranging between 20% to 100% in a sector where they employ a lot of people, they have impacts on the entire value chain from farmers to the entertainers to the household and the employees that they support. This is not the time to now impose an additional burden without proper consultation, without using evidence. It just doesn't seem right, particularly because this administration just has barely 1 month to go. So why the hurry? What's the emergency? About excise tax or green taxes. These are issues that require a lot of, consultation. And as part of in addition to that policy inconsistency, if you actually take the whole green tax conversation as well, you would say to yourself, the same government that is subsidizing fossil fuel by way of petrol subsidy, the same government that requires a lot of printing of documents, manual processes for interaction with them rather than e-government to save a lot of plants. It's the same government that's introducing, taxes on single-use bags without thinking about the alternatives available to the people in that process. So I think that's really a contradiction that does not help the investment climate.
Okay, so let's look at one of the areas that's been a major controversy from last year. The Buhari administration had previously suspended the imposition of a 5% tax on telecommunications services in the country. The chairman of the Association of Licensed Telecom Owners of Nigeria, Gbenga Adebayo, said they are already paying 39 multiple taxes coupled with the electricity situation and that they would not be able to absorb this tax for Nigerians. So when you look at taxing telecommunication services, something we spoke about when the suspension came about, does this look more like an easy out? When you look at sort of the layer of the taxes that are introduced with the FPM 2023, does this seem more like an easy way out for the government rather than the government addressing why it's having revenue shortfalls and why its revenue can no longer meet its financial obligations?
Yes, I think the government needs to take a step back and think about a holistic, robust, and broad-based strategy for raising revenue. So when you just come up once in a while with one thing here and there, it's never going to help you to achieve the result that you're looking for. So the excise duty on telecommunication was actually introduced about 2 years ago based on the final start for 2020, I believe it was, either 2020 or 2021. But then the lawmakers gave the powers to the president to then decide what the rate would be and when the commencement of that new tax would take place. And that was what the president did last year. I think it was around May. So, and then there was the outcry from the sector about paying many taxes. I have to say, yes, the sector pays a lot of taxes, but actually that's the same thing for all the sectors in Nigeria. So we just spoke about manufacturers. They actually pay even more taxes than almost any other sector in Nigeria, which is really an irony. So we had a lot of intervention from the Minister for Communication and Digital Economy, all manners of intervention, and then there was the impression that this tax has been suspended, but only for these new fiscal policy measures to say, by the way, the tax was not suspended and the tax will actually continue to apply. I'm not sure it's been implemented as of yet. Is there an easy way out? I would say yes. In countries where they have excise tax on telecommunication, it's easy for them to collect because you don't need to chase 1,001 people or 1 million people. You only need to chase a few telcos, and you can't hide the data because it's easy to audit, it's easy to track. In fact, people who are paying the taxes may not even know they are paid because if you're buying 1,000 naira airtime before, you still buy 1,000 naira airtime, just like it will run out a little bit faster than before. So as much as government can look for ways of generating revenue, they cannot close their eyes to the fact that there are multiple taxation we need to address. Imagine if you harmonize the taxes in the telecom sector from 33 to say 10, and you say, well, I need to then introduce excise. Nobody's going to reject that, and you make more money, and the people would actually pay less because the inefficiency of collection and corruption that you have in most cases for those multiple taxes will be eliminated.
So how do you see the FPM 2023 affecting the different sectors? Now we've spoken, of course, about the manufacturing sector. Agriculture comes into play with the tobacco situation as well. People online have been having this conversation around beverages, so we're going to see some impact with brewers as well. So primarily manufacturing, the telecommunications services sectors as well. And then even the impact on the country's economy, growth, inflation, and unemployment figures. What do you see the long-term impact if these FPM measures are going to stay in place? Because the next question will be, will they stay in place? But first, in terms of the impact, what do you expect it to be?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the impact is not looking positive overall because the key sectors that are being impacted. You have manufacturing, you have telecommunication, and then you have transportation. These are very critical sectors that tend to flow directly into inflation, particularly when you have a cost push inflation that we have in Nigeria at the moment. So these measures are inflationary in and of themselves, and government has to find a way of addressing those issues that they have in mind, because I believe this is well intentioned, such that they get the end result they're looking for without the dislocation that these policies can potentially create. Take something like the green tax, right? We know Nigeria has a commitment to net zero, and so is a number of countries around the world. But when Russia happened to Europe, they even went back to coal because you have to think about your national interest first. So Nigeria needs to do net zero, granted, but how do we do net zero without compromising or sacrificing the employment of our people, their livelihood? Poverty is already ripe, inflation is rising. You have to find a way of balancing those different needs, so that ultimately whatever you do is in the overall interest of the economy. We saw the data for FDI, foreign direct investment, for last year. It was less than $500 million for the whole country for a whole year. That's what you should get from just one project, right? But when you start having policy inconsistency, you are not only discouraging expansion and domestic capital formation, you are discouraging foreign investment as well, because for them it's about signaling. We need to be mindful of all of these while trying to implement whatever policies we have in mind, particularly if we seem to be doing them very late in the day to the end of the administration.
And that's where the final question is taking us. So this comes at the last days of the Buhari administration, an administration that has had 8 years to implement some of these measures. But it's also an administration that has faced 2 recessions, the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Is now really the time for us to see this administration trying to push to, in probably 30, 31 days, these FPM measures? And is it something you would expect the incoming President-elect Tinubu's administration to suspend when he assumes office? The conversation around taxation, widening the tax base, increasing taxes is on. And there's pressure for countries like Nigeria to increase taxes, whether it's VAT or in other avenues. So when we look at the Buhari administration bringing this in at the last days, the President-elect's administration probably having to be the one to deal with it. And then, of course, hearing that the suspension of the fuel subsidy removal is on as well, you see that there are a number of issues that are just right here at the borderline of the end of the Buhari administration and the beginning of the Tinubu administration. What do you think should happen with the FPM measures for 2023?
Yeah, you're right. There are quite a number of issues. There's also the one of census. Many of us are asking that questions. Those questions about why now, if you had 8 years to do many of these things. So I believe that even the current administration would listen and suspend these policy measures so they can have more engagement. If they don't, I would expect that the new government should suspend them, because that's also one way for them to demonstrate that they are private sector driven and that they want to facilitate growth. When it comes to generating revenue, I think if we do anything that is different from number one, how do you expand the tax net to ensure that everybody complies, including government agencies, by the way, which based on the Auditor General report are also not tax compliant. Number two is, how do you ensure that you harmonize the various taxes within the system and the revenue collecting agencies? And number three, actually, which is the most important, how can you introduce policies that are investment friendly so that when you grow the economy, naturally your tax revenues will go up? So these are the things I expect the new government, incoming government, to do. Otherwise, we may just be in for a very long next 4 years if we continue in the same path. which is really not what we want for Nigeria. Whether it's to do with subsidy removal, whether it's to do with fiscal policies, whether it's to do with harmonizing exchange rates, whether it's to do with debt management, these things require a lot of thinking, and it requires a strategy that actually connects the dots, not sitting, isolated or pulling in opposite direction. We have to put all our efforts, our resources, our intelligence, and our abilities and skills together. And I'm looking forward to a government that is going to say, by the way, private sector, it is not us against you. We're actually working together. Listen to the private sector, take in their information, show that you care about them, and you are sensitive to the challenges that they face. And you see investment flowing in that direction in billions of dollars.
All right, so there is a way forward if our leaders are ready to listen. Taiwo Oyedele, Fiscal Policy Partner and Africa Tax Leader at PwC. It's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tolu.
And as Nigeria has suspended the census that was meant to begin tomorrow, as well as the removal of fuel subsidy coming from the National Economic Council, many are hoping that there will also be a suspension of these fiscal policy measures for 2023 that are looking at adding an additional tax burden on Nigerians. Will we see the Buhari administration do that in its final days, or will that be one of the first things that the Tinubu administration does when it assumes office? These are all conversations that will be had right here on Business Edge as we keep African business, the economy, and finance front and center. I'm Tolulope Adeleru-Balogun. Thank you so much for joining me. Don't forget, at 12 p.m. West African time, you have New Central Now coming your way. You have a good day.